And this was a very big win for Johnny Depp. He brought this action. He had the burden to show that he was defamed. It was all about the credibility of Amber Heard. She testified for hours, and the jury watched everything, and they decided.
And they decided, right? And of course, his lost earnings obviously were significant. All right, well, we'll see what happens from here, but so many had watched that. Jean Casarez, thank you so very much. And thanks so much to all of you. AC 360 begins now.
Good evening. With funerals underway for the victims of last week's school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, we have another mass shooting to report tonight, this time Tulsa, Oklahoma. Police say at least 3 people are dead, plus the shooter at a medical office building near the city's St. Francis Hospital. CNN's Joe Johns is working the story. He joins us now. What do we know so far, Joe?
Anderson, what we do know, at least according to the authorities so far, is that 3 people have been reported dead as a result of this shooting. A 4th, if you include the shooter himself, and we're also told by authorities that 1 person was taken from the hospital in critical condition. This initially went out, according to authorities, as a report of a man with a rifle and escalated into an active shooter situation at the St. Francis Hospital campus in what is referred to as the Natalie Building, apparently a very large building. Authorities having to go door to door there in that building and remove people in what they're referring to as a slow evacuation. So not a lot of additional details in this. At first, authorities called this a catastrophic scene. We still don't know any more details about why they would be referring to it in that way. What we do know at this time is 3 dead, 4, including the shooter, and 1 person reported in critical condition. Anderson.
Do we know anything about the medical complex where the shooting took place? That might give us information about how the person was able to get inside.
Not a lot of information from the authorities about that, other than it's certainly part of the community, and you have the hospital and you also have the building apparently where all of this occurred. There was 1 report that authorities shared indicating that this individual may have gone to this location specifically looking for a doctor. We don't know who that doctor is or the doctor's whereabouts at this time, Anderson.
The police spokesman said that the building is being checked and evacuated floor by floor. Do we know how long that may take? How many rooms we're talking about?
The authorities didn't give us a time specifically, but they did ask everyone to be patient because they said it's a very large building and that they did have to go door to door in this slow evacuation. So that suggests it could take a while.
Yeah, we should point out also these are early reports, which, as we know, can often be wrong. Joe, is there anything that's known about the condition of the wounded person?
No, other than critical condition, and certainly your warning there about this being early information is something I have to pass along also, because we don't know whether, for example, that person who was listed in critical condition is now included as part of the fatalities or not. But what authorities have told us is 3 dead, 4 including the shooter, 1 person critical, taken from the hospital.
And is it clear anything about the people who were killed, whether they were intended targets related to this doctor, if this person was searching for a particular certain medical personnel?
No, and that is interesting also. It's not clear at all. What we know, though, at least from a member of the city council in Tulsa who appeared on our air in the previous program, there's some indication that this individual, after he completed the shooting, went ahead and shot and killed himself.
We're going to talk to that member of the city council just now. Joe Johns, appreciate it. Thank you. We're expecting to hear from local authorities at 8:15. With us by phone right now, Tulsa City Councilor Jamie Fowler. Councilor, appreciate you being with us. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. What have you learned about this incident?
Well, you're breaking up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Councilor Fowler, it's Anderson Cooper. You're on the air. Just wondering an update on what you have learned about this incident.
Well, here's what we know so far is that an active shooter was in the Natalie Warren building adjacent to St. Francis Hospital. It's a physician specialty building, and from what we're getting from sources is that there was an active shooter and they were looking for a physician, and they were not able to find that physician. And 3 innocent people in that building have been shot, and we're picking up information also that there may have been another person wounded. And obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of that shooter. And the shooter did take his own life, and we do know that. Tulsa Police Department, the Riverside, I believe the Riverside Division, they actually prepared. They did training yesterday for just such a situation, and they've been trained and prepared for just this. So it could have been possibly worse. Nonetheless, this has just been very tragic.
Yeah, could you tell me a little about what you know about the facility where this occurred? You're saying it's outpatient, so it's it's not an inside area of a hospital. It's relatively accessible, I assume.
It's not inside a hospital. It's a building just adjacent to St. Francis Hospital. There's a walkway from the hospital to the building. The building is approximately 9. I'm going to say maybe 9 to 11 stories, 12 stories high. It's where specialty practices are located. Physicians that serve that hospital.
Yeah.
It's there on the campus.
Yeah. Well, Councilor Fowler, I appreciate you taking the time to fill us in a little bit more. We're expecting to hear from local authorities at 8:15. Appreciate it, Councilor. We'll give you more information as we learn. And turning now to the mass shooting 8 days ago in Uvalde, Texas, and CNN's continued attempts to try and get answers about what actually happened after more than a week of various law enforcement figures and politicians giving out false information, evasive answers to direct questions, and now trying to hide from reporters. As you may know, last Friday, Colonel Stephen McGraw, director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, finally gave out some hard facts days after the shooting, revealing finally how police on the scene in the school were ordered to stand by and had to listen as a gunman continued to shoot inside that classroom, not just when the gunman first entered, but again at 11:37, and then at 11:38, and then at 11:40 a.m., and then again 11:44 a.m. As the minutes ticked by, we now know police were in the hallway outside the classroom listening, waiting, because according to Colonel McGraw, the incident commander believed they needed to wait for a tactical team to come in, believing that it was no longer that it was a situation of a person now barricaded in a classroom, and that there was no reason to rush in and try to stop that shooter as the shots continued to fire. At that point, there were 19 police officers in the hall listening as shots went off minute after minute, and 911 calls were also coming in from the classroom, one at 12:10. Another 12:13, a child calling for help. She called again at 12:16, according to police, and more calls after that. A full hour went by before that tactical team finally acted and killed the gunman. That incident commander is Pete Arredondo, chief of the Uvalde School District's police force at the time. He's also now a freshly minted member of Uvalde City Council. He's the one who Texas state law enforcement officials say has not responded to a request for a follow-up interview about the shooting. It's the same Pete Arredondo who did not answer questions after making a brief statement on the day of the shooting with no actual details of what happened, and hasn't said anything since. Well, today, CNN's Shimon Prokupecz, who, by the way, has done a remarkable reporting job since this shooting began, trying to get answers day after day, well, he found Arredondo, and I just want to play for you how that went. And in particular, listen to Mr. Arredondo's explanation about why he isn't saying anything in public or giving out any facts or having anyone give out actual information to parents about what happened to their children, and why he chose to not follow universally accepted active shooter protocols.
Chief, how are you? Shimon from CNN. How are y'all? So I want to talk to you about your decision and what the DPS
How are you, sir?
director said.
How's it going?
Good. I'm Pete. Nice to
Matt
meet you.
Freeman, nice to
I
meet
want
you.
to talk to you about the
Sure.
decision and what
Department we're doing, but just to let y'all know, and I just spoke with him.
I know you did. But
You're not bluffing me, are you?
No.
No,
Matt,
no.
turn this way.
No, just so y'all know. Just so you all know, obviously, we're not going to release anything. We have people in our community being buried, sir. So we're
Right,
going to be
but
respectful.
I just want your
We're gonna-
reaction
we're gonna,
to
we're going to be
The director
we're
McGraw
gonna-
saying that you were responsible for the decision
right.
to
We're
go
gonna
into
be,
that room. How do you
we're
explain
gonna be,
yourself to
We're
the
going to be
parents?
respectful to the family.
I understand that, but you have an
we're going-
opportunity
Oh, and sure, and we're
to explain
going to.
yourself to the parents.
And just so you know, we're gonna do that eventually, obviously.
When?
And whenever this is done, and we let the families quit grieving, then we'll do that, obviously. And just so
But you
just so everybody,
understand how
and
the
just so everybody,
families- how the
just so
family
everybody
feels.
knows, we've been in contact with DPS every day. Just so you all know.
They say you're
Every
not.
day.
They say that you're not cooperating.
I've been on the phone with them every day.
But
just so
they
you all
say
know.
you're not cooperating. So just 2 seconds.
Just so you know, we've been talking to them every day.
What
I
is your
appreciate y'all.
what is your reaction
Y'all
to
have a
him?
good day.
What is your reaction, sir?
So he's saying he isn't releasing any information because, quote, we're going to be respectful during the burial period. And when Shimon presses him, he follows up by saying they'll give out factual information, quote, whenever this is done and we let the families quit grieving. Really? This is why Pete Arredondo has been silent for more than a week, because he's being respectful. Respectful would have been to make the right decisions based on training that any law enforcement officer in this country should have had by now. That would have been respectful. Also, not letting false information linger out there for days. False information, which, by the way, just happened to cover for what appears to be this man's own inept response. Remember all that talk about the gunman barricaded in the classroom as if he had somehow built some sort of fortification. He wasn't barricaded. He locked the door. There were 19 officers with guns outside that door. It was locked. They finally got a key from the janitor. We now know that. So Pete Arredondo apparently thinks it is respectful to let false information that portrays him and his decisions in a positive light remain in parents' minds, but correcting that and keeping parents informed, that is somehow disrespectful. As for Mr. Arredondo's statement that he'll reveal the truth once the families, quote, quit grieving, I think you might want to understand that when your child dies, you never quit grieving. It doesn't stop. Life is never the same. They may have to return to work and try to return to some semblance of their former lives, but it will never be the same. That bed will always be empty in their home. Shimon Prokupecz joins us now from Uvalde. Shimon, I mean, again, you've just been doing such an important job at trying to get answers, and I got to say, it really is hard to watch the way, some law enforcement figures in this town have continued to stonewall and continued to cherry pick facts, focus on, well, we spent a lot of time breaking windows and getting other kids out, which is great and important, but 19 officers, I reread what McGraw's statement was on Friday. The details are sickening. 19 officers standing in a hallway minute by minute as 911 calls are coming in, and they are listening to more shots as they're being told, I guess, by their incident commander that, oh, no, this is not, everybody's dead. I guess that's what the incident commander thought or claimed, because I don't know how he would know that, because no one had actually checked on the bodies because they couldn't get in the classroom, or they wouldn't get in the classroom. The chief said he would explain himself to the parents after, quote, we let the families quit grieving. Have you ever heard of an explanation like that?
No, I've never, Anderson. In fact, any police chief at any scene, especially after something like this, where so many children were victims, dead, injured, is out there explaining things to parents, explaining things to the public. He's been hiding, Anderson. He's been ducking. He's been hiding other officials. There were several press conferences after this by the governor, by the state authorities.
Right, and by the way,
he was nowhere to be found.
They gave the governor wrong information. And the governor went out there praising law enforcement, praising the response, saying, if it wasn't for them going in when the bullets were firing, we now know that that is not actually really what occurred. And also for him to say to you, we're being respectful, the implication is you're not being respectful because you're just asking questions that a lot of grieving parents would like answers to, frankly. He's, by claiming that he's being respectful in a way that covers his own ass is just, I was stunned when I first heard this.
Yeah, but it's also his demeanor there. If you notice, there's really no sympathy there, right? It's more about him and him protecting himself, and that's how he's carried himself through this. It's one of the reasons why I think it's been so important to confront these officials here, to get them to answer these questions, because they clearly have been hiding this information since the beginning, wanting to paint sort of this light, sort of that they did everything right, that they went in there and that they were heroes. And that has been always the issue here. And for this chief, who we haven't seen for days. I mean, we've been outside his house. This morning, we saw him outside his house, and then we went to his office where we were able to confront him. He's going to work. He's just got elected to the city council. They held a private swearing in for him last night, the mayor protecting him so that we would not be able to question him. So you have to ask, what is going on here, and why is it that we keep getting stonewalled at every turn by several different authorities?
And I gotta say, I went back because I was thinking, am I like insane? Am I overreacting to this? I went back, I've read every single press conference they gave, every single statement every law enforcement official has made, and it's all so carefully worded that it's, I mean, when you look at it in retrospect, it just is all to gloss over 42 minutes to an hour that they knew nothing was being done.
No, you're absolutely right. And even when we would confront them with questions, they're like, oh, we'll get back to you, right? Remember that last Thursday at that press conference? They knew what I was asking. They knew where I was going. Everyone I talked to, the minute I landed here, that was the big question for me. What was going on in that hour? I have never seen police officials conduct themselves in this way. Sadly, I've covered several mass shootings, several high crime incidents. I have never seen officials conduct themselves this way. And you know, Anderson, to your point, many of the people in this community are thankful for us seeking the answers. It's not about us, but they are thankful for it. And some of these officials would like to see us pack our bags and leave and not go around chasing them to try and get answers.
Well, this is what the strategy is. The strategy is, you know, being respectful until the funerals are over, which will be, I don't know, a week to 2 weeks. At which point, there's not going to be a lot of media there, probably, and the rest of the country is going to move on, and they're going to then issue at some point down the road a report months from now that won't get the attention that it should get, and this kind of thing will just be swept under the rug because that's what they are trying to do under the guise of being respectful, and that is the most disrespectful thing you can possibly do to a group of parents whose children have just been murdered. I mean, it's, again, Shimon, I'm thankful for your reporting. Thank you. I want to get some perspective now from CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Andrew, you and I spoke, it was the day after the shooting when I was down there, and you were raising questions then about, this response, which clearly there was something that was not right. It was obvious that, if 40 minutes to an hour go by when there's an active shooter situation, that is a complete reversal and a complete, ignoring active shooter protocol. What do you make of Chief Arradondo's responses here?
Well, I have to first say, Anderson, as a member of the law enforcement community, as a leader in the law enforcement community, I have enormous pride in my own service to this country and for what my colleagues did and continue to do. And as a member of that community, I have to tell you, this is sickening to watch. It is absolutely so, it is so contrary to everything that you are taught and encouraged to do as a person who's entrusted with protecting the community. To have this man literally hiding behind the grief of families who are burying their children, it's absolutely, it's horrendous, it's inexplicable, and he should be called out by people like Shimon as often as possible. I mean, I can't explain it.
When it comes to his cooperation or possible lack thereof, it seems, how is this stage in the investigation supposed to work? And what are the ramifications if Chief Arradondo is not being as forthcoming as we are led to believe he is not being?
Yeah, so law enforcement agencies typically, there's no predicate for this. There's no template for when you come in to figure out what happened in a mass casualty event. The law enforcement agencies are resisting providing information. Yet in this situation, not only have they provided misinformation on numerous occasions about all kinds of important details, but they've done so in a way that is clearly an effort to represent themselves in the best light possible, even when that light is complete fiction. So I have never seen, and I've managed the FBI's response to numerous crisis events, from the Pulse nightclub shooting, the Boston Marathon bombing, and on and on and on and on. And I've never seen a situation like this where not only are they parsimonious with the facts and incompetent in their relation of exactly what happened, but they appear to be engaged in a deliberate effort to cover up their own decisions and the impact that those decisions had on the lives of 19 children and 2 teachers. It's just unbelievable.
I also just want to say, and I'm going to hold myself to this, I don't care how long it takes for this report to be made public. And whenever Chief Arredondo's, when the information actually finally does come out, and if it's buried in some report a year from now, we are going to focus on it and pay attention to it and go into it in great detail, because it is the idea that it's very possible part of his strategy is just, let's just wait till all these outsiders leave, and this thing, it'll just be the grieving families left, although in his mind, I guess they stopped grieving at a certain point. It'll just be these families left, and then, we'll tell them what we're going to tell them.
Well, when that day comes, Anderson, when that day comes, I'll be here to do it with you, because I have great concerns about the DOJ investigation. It is not a criminal investigation, so they won't have a grand jury and grand jury subpoenas and things like that to force people to comply with their efforts. So I'm concerned about how that's going to go. But I absolutely agree. We need to stay focused on what happened here and hold people accountable.
Yeah, this is just wrong. Andrew McCabe, appreciate it. Thank you. Coming next, the verdict in Johnny Depp's defamation lawsuit against his ex-wife and her suit against him. And later, an exclusive, for the first time since leaving his job, a former senior advisor to the House January 6th committee talks about the scope of the investigation, what he says it has already uncovered about how much deeper, broader, and more alarming the attempt to overturn the 2020 election actually was.
We share this place, we all belong. We have to restore this planet's soul. Teach it something more than what we know. Give it water, give it sun, room to grow. I can see a better tomorrow. I can see a better tomorrow.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers. Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Today on CNN.
I'm Timothy Kelly, and I am the Managing Director of Atlantis Dubai. What we're bringing to the table this week is Atlantis the Royal, and it's a new resort that we're unveiling, and we call it the most luxurious ultra-luxury resort in the world. If you look around us, even today, what do you see? You see competition. You see Saudi Arabia, you see Oman, you see all of the different surrounding GCC countries that are all striving and driving and focused on tourism. And so in order to continue to be competitive, you need to continue to evolve. It's quite an undertaking and quite a challenge. And so this product is something that all of Dubai and all of the surrounding world will want to see and experience and learn more about as we unveil it in the fourth quarter of this year.
The Amber Heard-Johnny Depp court battle is over tonight. For now, a jury in Fairfax, Virginia, finding Heard and ex-husband Depp liable for defamation in their lawsuits against each other. He sued her over a 2018 Washington Post op-ed that she wrote. In it, without naming Depp, she described herself as, quote, a public figure representing domestic abuse. Allegations detailing that abuse and counter-allegations by Depp dominated the trial. Jurors found that Heard defamed Depp in 3 separate statements in the Post piece, and that Depp defamed Heard with one statement his attorney made. The jury awarded Depp $10 million in compensatory damages, $5 million in punitive damages. Then the judge reduced that to the state cap of $350,000. The jury awarded Heard $2 million in compensatory damages and no money for punitive damages. More now on the testimony that went into their decision. Randy Kay has that.
But never did I myself reach the point of striking Ms. Heard in any way.
Actor Johnny Depp in court, vowing he's not the abusive monster his ex-wife made him out to be. Both he and Amber Heard testified at length during the 6-week trial, offering differing accounts of alleged abuse.
First bottle went.
Depp said during a 2015 trip to Australia, Heard threw a vodka bottle at him that cut off the top of one of his fingers.
I looked down and realized that the tip of my finger had been severed.
For her part, Heard told the jury Depp sexually assaulted her using a liquor bottle.
Do you recall what Mr. Depp was saying to you when he had the bottle and was pushing it against your pubic bone?
He said that he would kill me. I'll kill you.
More disturbing details came to light when Depp testified he'd found feces in the couple's bed back in 2016. Depp's security guard pointed the finger at Heard, yet she blamed it on the dog. Each side tried to paint the other as the abuser.
You didn't stop him.
Heard's lawyers introduced 2013 text messages from Depp in which he wrote a friend about Heard. "Let's drown her before we burn her, and I will F her burnt corpse afterward to make sure she is dead." Depp explained them away in court as irreverent.
That would be April 8th, 2016.
Depp's lawyers tried to diminish Heard's credibility, citing this journal entry she wrote to Depp apologizing for
Quote,
hurting him.
"I'm sorry I can get crazy. I'm sorry I hurt you."
His lawyers also accused her of doctoring photos of her injuries, which she denied, and they pointed out what they said was the absurdity of her giving Depp a knife as a gift.
That's the knife you gave to the man who was hitting you, right, Miss Heard?
I wasn't worried he was going to stab me with it when I gave it to him, that's for certain.
More damning testimony against Depp came from Amber Heard's sister, who said she witnessed Depp's abuse.
Johnny had already grabbed Amber by the hair with one hand and was whacking her repeatedly in the face with the other.
Among the more than 24 witnesses, orthopedic surgeons, psychiatrists, and a supermodel. Kate Moss testified in Depp's defense to debunk the claim he once pushed her down a flight of stairs.
We were leaving the room, and Johnny left the room before I did, and there had been a rainstorm, and as I left the room, I slid down the stairs, and I hurt my back.
Did Mr. Depp push you in any way down the stairs?
No.
In the end, it came down to who the jury saw as the true victim, Johnny Depp or Amber Heard.
But I have never in my life committed sexual battery physical abuse.
I called him horrible, ugly things, as you can hear. And
Sell out.
We spoke to each other in a really horrible way.
Randy Kay, CNN, Palm Beach County, Florida.
Well, coming up 1 week from tomorrow, the January 6th committee begins a series of 8 public hearings. Former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman, who recently worked with the committee as a senior technical advisor, is going to join us to talk about what the public may learn about the attack on the Capitol and the former president.
This is the screen where it happens. The moments that can change the world.
These are the faces we see, the voices we empower.
This is the work that continues, who we are today and what we can become.
This is journalism that reflects the world we live in.
It is actually very complicated to move money around the world. Few companies can do it at scale. Few companies can do it in the number of countries that we do it. And so these companies that come together, like MoneyGrams and like our competitors, do really provide a very unique service, and that is to instantly move money, get funds from the United States to Mexico, literally in sub-seconds. For the ability to take $350 that you worked hard to earn and get it back to your mother, so that she can pick it up in Mexico, use it for food, healthcare, housing, is actually a very unique service. If you're from many of the countries, Mexico, Philippines, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, some of the largest receive markets in the world, it's absolutely critical to the lives of the consumers in those countries. But many people don't appreciate that. If it's not the life that you live, then it's not something that you really ever really get involved in.
I'm Nick Payton-Walsh, outside of Kharkiv, Ukraine, and this is CNN.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels, connected to your world.
I am Nigerian by blood, British by birth, and American by residence. It is important to me that those same strands of inclusivity that flow through me are mirrored in the stories that we tell. One World is a place where Africa has an equal seat at the global table alongside Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Every continent has a voice, and where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, tonight on CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
A week from tomorrow, the January 6th committee will hold its first of 8 public hearings this month after nearly a year's work. More than 1,000 interviews, and despite massive Republican obstruction. In particular, from House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and 4 other Republicans, they've refused to comply with the committee's subpoenas for information.
My position has not changed on this committee. It's not valid because Republicans were not allowed to appoint anybody. This is purely Pelosi appointed.
Now, what Leader McCarthy said today is not true. Speaker Pelosi rejected 2 of McCarthy's appointments. One of them, Jim Jordan, is one of the 5 who've refused to comply with the committee's subpoenas. She gave McCarthy the option to replace the 2 who were rejected. He declined and pulled the 3 members who were accepted. Several Republican members of Congress did end up working with the committee, and a CNN exclusive, one of them joins me tonight, former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman of Virginia. This is his first interview since serving on the committee as a senior technical advisor and leaving it. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows has been a key source of information as he provided thousands of text messages to the committee. How valuable has the information he provided been to uncovering how extensive the efforts to overturn the election were?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Anderson. I think, as my team was the first to actually see the Meadows text messages when we were able to link the numbers and the names together after we got the thousands of text messages. So to look at it, it's almost a roadmap to what happened. And a lot of the texts haven't come out. Thankfully, I think the committee is going to do a great job of linking those text messages to the other interviews and data that they have. But I think what people are going to understand about the Meadows text messages is how horrible they are. I have to tell you this, Anderson, when I first saw them, my bemusement turned into horror pretty quickly when I saw some of the language that was being used in there. I actually had to get away from the computer a couple of times as I was looking at these text messages. And, starting November 3rd, November 4th, in the Meadows text messages all the way to the end, it is a roadmap. And I would have to say at this point, I think Mark Meadows is the MVP for the committee. I think they should pay him. The data that we got from there actually allowed us to really structure an effective investigation.
I mean, you mentioned this, but many of the text messages that Meadows provided were to phone numbers that weren't attached to a name. Who was Meadows communicating with, and how did you figure that out?
Well, I was fortunate when I was brought on as a senior technical advisor. Congressman was just my cover, Anderson. My background was in the intelligence community and Department of Defense for 20 years. And, I did a lot of telephony analysis, geolocation and things like that in my life. I was actually trained at NSA, but I was also trained with Air Force Special Projects. And so when they brought me on, Liz and the Pelosi team, when I interviewed, they understood that I had this background that was very unique, for somebody in Congress. So I wrote the contracts for the phone record team and the contract for the open source intelligence research team. Put the funding together because I was a CEO. I did do program management for those type of programs. And I was able to handpick those teams that support three-letter agencies. And right now, I would say that without those teams, I think they're the real heroes of this investigation. I don't like to use their names, but if I can talk about, Golf Bravo and Mike Tango, right, and those type of individuals that are out there right now, another Mike Tango, right, all these people that have been helping with these contracts and with this analysis, they're some of the best individuals I've ever met. And the fact is, we had to hand select these teams, people who had supported three-letter agencies, and then build an unclassified lab that tried to mimic a classified lab. And we were able to do that on a pretty limited budget, and I'm very proud of them. But linking those numbers to those names are specific types of databases. I'm not going to mention those names right now, but we were very effective in helping the committee not only linking names to numbers, thousands of them. We were also very effective in helping with writing the subpoenas for preservation records, for call detail records, and also actually identifying other high-value assets, right, that were in the ecosystem at that time.
You said right before that you were so troubled by what you saw that you had to step away from your computer. What do you mean? What did you see that was so troubling?
I think, I'd said before, you start with these people can actually believe these things, but I was looking at former colleagues that were sending horrific things, whether it was, I would say, foreign disinformation videos from YouTube or Rumble or Parler. I was looking at things that it almost looked like it was a holy war within the text messages themselves. And it was
These are
interlaced
sitting
with
members of
things
Congress
that,
you're talking about.
That's correct. Sitting and former members of Congress. You're talking about Trump appointees. You're talking about fundraisers and donors. You're talking about group texts. And I would get something, Anderson, that might be as crazy as, the orcs are storming the bridge, right? And we need to have some wizard spells to cast on them to, stop the monkey birds from attacking us. And I would have somebody high up, very high up in the Trump administration say, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that's true. And it wasn't just what they were saying. It wasn't just this sort of spiritual warfare coupled with, QAnon type of, religiosity and types of conspiracy theories. It was the fact that nobody pushed back, or they would tacitly agree, or they would say, this is the plan that we need to do. And the names that you're seeing out there right down the news that's reported, there's some amazing open source intelligence researchers, things like that people can see on Twitter and other posts. Those people are in these text messages. And when you see them, Anderson, it is a roadmap, but it also is something that you really have to try to get your arms around. And I've read those text messages so many times, you almost feel like you're reading a fantasy novel. And I think people need to understand that the committee has an amazing challenge to try to get around the horror of those text messages and some of the things that you see on there. And it is horror, because these are people that are serving our government, and you can see, almost QAnon and other conspiracy theories had inundated the Republican Party all the way up to the top levels. And, some of those were like the Jenny Thomas texts and things like that. It's absolutely stunning that these individuals in a position of power are making policy.
You also found out that Meadows and the people he was texting with would move their conversations to encrypted platforms. I remember seeing one that he said, okay, I'm sending you something on Signal. You had no way of accessing those communications, right? I mean, will we ever know what transpired on Signal and elsewhere?
Unless they've given up voluntarily. And I think the committee's been very effective in identifying some of those individuals that were willing to cooperate. So some of those Signal chats were given up voluntarily, and also other text message chats. And what's interesting, Anderson, is my biggest fear to talking to you is not just making sure I don't anger too many people, since I seem to have a propensity to do that based on data, but it's also that I don't want to give away how we do things too much, because I'm worried. The thing that I have a lot of concern about with the committee is that we're giving away almost a playbook, or a new, what we say in the military, tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, that we're giving something away based on this report. So the things that we have done, how we've identified individuals, how we've linked certain types of data, I believe is so robust that I'm almost afraid to go too deep into how we find these things. But right now, we're close to 20 million lines of data. Anderson, this is the biggest data exercise and effort in the history of Congress, and it's been a hell of a thing to try to get our arms around. But again, I think the committee is going to do a good job moving forward and trying to link all that data.
I mean, what you're describing sounds like people within the government talking about a coup of our democracy.
Anderson, when I first started this, I was afraid to use that term because I wanted to see the data. The term I like to use was coup-like movements, right? It's a military thing. When we would make fun of people who said they were working, but they weren't work-like movements, right? They were just talking. But looking at the interconnectivity between people, what we call the centers of gravity and telephony analysis, so many people are communicating. The link analysis is absolutely massive. And what the committee has to do, because we're limited in our authorities, there's some disinformation out there that, we can see content, right? Or we've got geolocations for telephones, things like that. We don't. So we had to use unclassified data platforms to try to recreate and find that type of data. So we are limited in what we can see, but what we can see is absolutely damning. And the committee has to actually push all those nodes together, all those little endpoints that are people or organizations. They have to link that with 1,000 interviews that they did, emails that they have, things like that I've been able to see, but also with the massive amount of data we've been able to aggregate and analyze. And I think that's very important for people to understand that the challenge for this committee, they might not cover everything because we have such a short amount of time. But Anderson, I would say we need another year to actually look at the amount of data that we have to see how deep this actually went.
I mean, based on what you've seen, can you say how high you think this effort to overturn the election goes? Does the committee have information about the former president's, involvement that isn't already known?
I don't want to take the committee's thunder, but I'll tell you this, which I think the American people should watch out for, and I can actually refer to the Meadows text messages. When you see text messages that have all three branches of government involved, and the one that really bothered me was the forwarded text from Jenny Thomas to Mark Meadows from Connie Hare, was a chief of staff for Louis Gohmert. We had the wife of a sitting Supreme Court justice, we had the chief of staff of a congressman, and the chief of staff of a president on one text message. When you talk about horror, when you talk about concern, when you talk about seeing the type of language that they're using, this fantastical language, this call to arms, this is our Omaha beach. When you see, the 5 most chilling words was the first text, I hope this is true, and you're talking about Gitmo, and you're talking about things like that at the top levels of government, I would say that the committee is going to have the ability to see what's going on there. And I guess it's just so troubling, because if I see people just talk about opinions or things like that, the issue is that these were policymakers at the top echelon, the top levels of government, and the committee has to decide this. And the American people have to decide this when they see the committee's evidence. Number one, was President Trump just sort of in the current, a willing participant, where he was led by others by the nose and really didn't know what was going on? Number two, is it somewhere in the middle, right, where he had situational awareness? He sort of knew what was going on, sort of had plans, and sort of was just a willing participant, right, and had some control? Or number three, the last one, was he really part of the command and control infrastructure, and how deep does that go, and was he a willing participant? And I think the data is going to be very compelling from the committee, but I think it's up to the American people after that's presented to come up using facts, not fantasy or opinion, using facts on what they think the culpability of the president is and the people around him.
Denver Riggleman, I appreciate your talking to us tonight. Thank you. I look forward to more.
Thank you so much, Anderson.
Got a live update next on the shooting in Tulsa. I'll be right back.
I'm Paula Newton in Ottawa, and this is CNN.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran. We are in Jerusalem.
Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see.
Observing countries on the move,
Still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, today on CNN. Africa Avant-Garde, Saturday on CNN, in association with Access Bank.
It's a mystery that gripped the world.
If you have Madeline, let her come home to her mummy, daddy, brother and sister.
A young girl's disappearance from a seaside resort.
Please give our little girl back.
15 years later, a major break.
Portuguese authorities have said that they have named a suspect.
CNN investigates.
So to be clear, the formal suspect is a convicted rapist and a known pedophile.
Missing Madeleine McCann, Saturday.
Since we first reported this at the top of the hour, the death toll in tonight's mass shooting in Tulsa has now climbed to 4, plus the shooter. Local officials spoke just moments ago. I want to go back to CNN's Joe Johns, who has the latest. What else did you learn?
We picked up a few more details from Deputy Police Chief, who briefed just a little while ago. Anderson, listen.
At 16:52, 4:52 hours, our dispatch received a call of an active shooter at the Natalie Medical Building at 6457 South Yale Avenue. We had officers arrive at the location at 4:56, so a 3-minute response time, and make contact with victims and the suspect at 5:01. And that was them making their way to the second floor. The officers that did arrive were hearing shots in the building, and that's what directed them to the second floor. Right now, we have 4 civilians that are dead. We have one shooter that is dead, and right now we believe that is self-inflicted.
And Joe, I spoke to the city councilor there earlier tonight. He said the gunman may have been targeting a specific physician. Did the police say anything about that?
No, they didn't say anything further. What we do know is there have been persistent reports that the shooter went into the hospital looking for a specific doctor. It's not clear whether he found a doctor, the doctor he was looking for. The other thing I think it's important to say is authorities are not sure whether there were just regular people, patients in other words, and medical people, or both, who were actually shot in this situation there in Tulsa.
And I understand the police have yet to identify the suspect.
Correct. They have yet to identify him. However, they do seem to know his age. They say he is 35 years old, and that's about all they can say. They are not ready to positively identify the shooter.
All right, Joe Johns, appreciate it. Thanks. Coming up next, a welcome ray of light on a pretty dark day, and a win-or-go home soccer match on the road to the World Cup. Ukraine's national men's team won. Details when we come back.
Deep trouble, and I'm Will Ripley in Taipei, Taiwan, and this is CNN.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me, Eleni Jokas, as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa.
This month, Connecting Africa through technology.
The fintech space in Nigeria and across Africa is really growing very well.
Connecting Africa on CNN, in association with Afreximbank.
I've personally met people around the world who told me that the first way that they found out about sex trafficking was through our documentary Nefarious. And for many people, that was the turning point that they chose to commit their life to fight this issue. My name is Helen Taylor, and I'm the Vice President of Impact at the anti-human trafficking organization Exodus Cry. We are currently headquartered in Southern California. Exodus Cry began back in 2008. Our founder, Benjamin Nolo, found out about the issue of trafficking and how it was a global human rights crisis. With a background in filmmaking, he went overseas to 19 different nations and interviewed survivors, spoke with global activists and politicians, and from that series of trips, he created a documentary called Nefarious Merchant of Souls. It's been used by hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations and communities to raise awareness. It's been shown on military bases, in churches, before the UN, in the US White House, parliaments around the world. So it's really is such a testament to the power of a documentary and a story that you're able to spotlight an incredibly important and urgent global issue in a way that many people beyond your immediate reach are able to hear about.